Combat is an art. Maliwan weapons are the paint. Our elemental tech transforms the battlefield from a cacophony of...
You will bury them under an avalanche of lead. And as they are driven back, they will see one brand of weapon in the hands of...
The corporations of the Borderlands universe are definitely an interesting topic for sure, and a side of the lore that I love discussing. Whether new information comes out or previously known things about these companies are expanded upon, it makes a large part of me excited and joyous, whilst also maintaining a small part of skepticism and reluctance, particularly nowadays. Expanding on previously void parts of lore can be extremely difficult for both players and the developers behind it, especially with super contentious decisions made around why these corporations or militaries exist in the first place and what their goals even are. Borderlands is no different from any other game, providing engaging lore and stories, while also leaving room for theory and skepticism around certain decisions. The development team, and more specifically the writers, have all had the power behind what these corporations have, what they are and what they do, and it seems that in recent times they have seemingly fell off the ball in terms of consistent narrative, lore accuracy, and overlapping decisions. However, with the release of Borderlands 4 Deep Dive, we were introduced to 3 brand new manufacturers: Order, Ripper, aka just Bandit, and Daedalus, and lost a few from previous games like Hyperion and Atlas, so I thought I'd talk about the already established megacorporations and brands to get you up to date. We're going to be exploring and explaining every company's smallest details, from who they are, what they do, what they want, how they do it, and how they contribute to the overall story of Borderlands, if at all. So, hiya, it's LFX and welcome back. Now, this series I'm starting with this video is slightly different to my literally every series you may be familiar with. Whilst that one is a bit more comedic, meme-filled, and in general a lot more fast-paced and in your face when it comes to the information, this new series is going to be a bit more chilled out and relaxing, giving a contrast to my main series while still relaying stuff I find interesting and engaging. If you like this sort of video, let me know by dropping a like and a sub and I'll continue. If not, that's no problem, as I am of course still continuing my literally every series and they are not going anywhere, so feel free to watch them whatever you like. Vamos! So who or what are these corporations or militaries? The corporations in the Borderlands universe essentially come down to the manufacturers that appear in all the games. These are companies that are as simple as being producers of shields to being the literal main villains of an entire story. They all also have their own way of operating, all have their own agendas, and all provide you with some sort of equipment during your time in the games. The militaries in the Borderlands universe are the same for the most part. There are exceptions here and there based around certain manufacturers not really having anything known about them, aside from their general presence in the universe, or not being militaries at all, and purely being manufacturers of weapons and supplies. Companies like S&S Munitions, Anshin, and Pangolin fit in here perfectly. In terms of what we know right now, Bandit Scav/COV is the only manufacturer at this current point that I can say with 100% certainty is the only one that is not a corporation and has no military presence behind it /them/what? Whilst yes, they do technically have an army in the COV themselves, it's not an operation that has leverage as a military. It has no company behind it and it is literally just a wacky cult that happens to also make weapons. So for that distinction and for the sake of straightforwardness, I'm not including it as a Borderlands universe military or company. Then there's the topic of Iridian 2. I've also decided that I'm not going to be including that as a company or manufacturer with a military backing. Whilst yes, they are a manufacturer in all of the games, they don't make stuff specifically for player use and just happen to have shit that we can pick up and use, whether that be guns in the first game, relics in the second, or the wacky gun in 3. COV at least have the argument of making stuff specifically to use and actually have an army, but boohoo la di da. So yeah, Iridian is off the list too. When it comes to the actual militaries themselves, there is disparities. Some operate as massive armies that occupy entire worlds and go on huge operations, whilst others are more privatized groups with less than known means as to why they even exist in the first place. Generally, of course. It's super interesting to me to see how they all operate, their army structure, the way they attack, the ships they use, and the style of military that they have based all the manufacturers themselves on. The most exciting part of these companies, and why I absolutely love them in these games, is the involvement that they have within the main stories. This is why I'm super hyped with the premise behind Borderlands 4. You see, in every Borderlands game that we've had so far, you could probably tell, we have had some sort of military as the main or secondary threat of the game, hunting us down, taking control, and trying to either 1, get what we want, 2, try to stop us from getting what we want, or a bit of both. Borderlands 1 gave us Atlas, Borderlands 2 gave us Hyperion, the pre-sequel gave us Dahl, and 3 kinda gave us Maliwan. And even New Tales had Tediore, but we'll get to that abomination when we actually talk about Tediore later. Atlas, Hyperion, and Dahl are the companies that I like to refer to as the Big Three. When it comes down to their involvement in the series, the power they seem to have at certain points, and the pure fanfare that they have gathered through their presence, these three will have the most lore behind them, as they are actually currently the most explored companies in Borderlands, so get ready for a whole lot of exposition on those. I am going to start off by covering the lesser known companies and corporations, militaries, and then slowly moving down to the more important mega corporations and militaries that we see popping up all over the universe. Now we're starting off with Not much is known about S&S Munitions. Being a manufacturer of guns and ammunition only in the first game, they took a pride in large magazines, bright colours, smart designs, and a high technological prowess over its competition. They are also quoted as hating reloads, as it is something you do after your target is dead. The company was founded by the S&S brothers, whose real names are currently unknown. These two clearly had a large passion for weaponry, as you can see from their very own S&S Munitions story. The brothers who first founded S&S Munitions did so with the goal to not just make a weapon, but to change an industry. As avid outdoorsmen with time in the military, they knew the power of your weapon only mattered when it was reloaded. Tired of seeing their clips run dry at the most inopportune times, they set out to develop the highest capacity guns on the market. S&S Munitions is now the standard bearer for large capacity, easy to change magazines. Today, our commitment to functional technological advancements doesn't end there. S&S Munitions also makes some of the most powerful tech weapons on the market. If power and capacity are your concerns, then say yes to S&S. From this story and the way their company operated, it's a pretty good guess that S&S never had any military backing or involvement, purely being a weapons and ammunition supplier, and a good one at that. Nothing is ever officially mentioned about them as a corporation more than a few posters, the occasional advertisements from Marcus, and the story I just read, so a solid answer could never be truly found. After the events of Borderlands 1 and the vault opening, S&S as a weapons and ammo company seemingly disappeared, which is a surprise given the spectacular advancements of other corporations like Hyperion and Dahl after the opening of the vault on Pandora. It's theorised that Bandit wiped out all assets to do with S&S as a weapons company, but there's not much backing to that from a lore sense. The only reason it became a theory in the first place, in my opinion, is purely because Bandit replaced them in-game, providing no real proof aside from a gameplay change. The universe in Borderlands is honestly vast, much bigger than Pandora, so it is possible they went out of business for other reasons. Maybe they're financially stable but simply stopped operating in this part of space due to a lack of profit. Perhaps when the vault opens and the e-tech boom occurred, they couldn't keep up with the prices and incoming corporations like Hyperion and their e-tech and decided it would be best to focus on other ventures. Or even as simple as they were great at making weapons, but struggled with managing the business side of things. It is all just theoretical at this point. Anything is better than the Bandit theory though. Those fuckers can't even spell their own gun names properly, let alone run a business off an entire planet. Whilst S&S Munitions aren't kicking anymore, another company under the name S&S Accessories is still operational, with it being pretty clear this is the same corporation, or at least the same operation as the original S&S, just with a different name. These days, S&S have moved away from making weaponry and more to the side of involving themselves in other ways, being the producers of the beams of light that you see when items of different rarities are on the floor. They frequently play radio ads in Borderlands 3, flaunting their new venture. I did mention that they were also an ammo supplier. Whilst this is something that seemingly disappeared, I don't think the reasoning is too much different to the general decline of their weapons side. It also makes a lot of sense as they got rid of their weapon-based items under their name, being replaced with many other manufacturers' ammo later down the line. When it comes to the timeline, it's a bit foggy as to when they stopped S&S Munitions and became S&S Accessories. Did they take a few years to leave their munitions venture behind? Are the same lights in Borderlands 2 also produced by S&S? Many questions, but seemingly not enough in the lore to point us to an answer, unfortunately. Sometimes it is good to speculate and have headcanons for this type of stuff, and sometimes it's good to just know everything. For S&S, I'm just glad they were still mentioned in a Borderlands game after the first one. In the darkest corners of the forest, where the shadows stretch long and the air is thick with secrets, slithers a creature unlike any other. Covered in armour as hard as bone, its scales gleam faintly in the dim light, sharp enough to pierce the very earth it crawls upon. It moves with a silent, unsettling grace, its beady eyes glowing with a cold, calculating intelligence. The Pangolin. Beware, for where the Pangolin treads, few dare follow. Not much is known about Pangolin either, being the least explored company in the series. They don't take to guns manufacturing, instead focusing their time into making mostly defensive equipment, much like their name suggests. They produce high-capacity shields, being higher than any other company can muster, but at a cost. They also pretty much dominate the grenade industry, being the base grenade that pretty much anyone and everyone will use grenade modifications on. Now, I have no idea how this could realistically fit into the lore, but Pangolin turtle shields famously take away your health. Maybe they're a terrible company that somehow temporarily poisons and leeches you when you equip a shield, which overcharges all their equipment to such a massive degree. That would make sense to how they seem to consistently overshadow every other company when it comes to pure capacity in their shields. Their grenades don't seem to have any technology like this, as it seems they utilise the market only at a base level, with other corporations making the grenade mods that go on top of it. Their main focus is shields, however, so it would make sense that they would use the technology on them, and therefore that market. Being producers of some evil life-draining power to boost other elements is a super interesting theory as to how their company operates. I imagine that they were like basically every other corporation, aka extremely evil and not moral in a single sense. That sort of exploitation of their workforce would make a lot of sense. Once again, this is just all speculation. The only thing we know for sure is that they are clearly a popular company and have kept to themselves so far in the grand scheme of things. I mean, they've been around since at least before Borderlands 1 and have stuck around in every single game with seemingly zero advertisements for any of their products. They are almost the complete opposite of any company like Dahl that just has to have their logo slapped abso-fucking-lutely everywhere. They've only ever had any form of exposure and brand flaunting in two places: Mad Moxie's Underdome, with Moxie reading advertisements for the company aloud, and in grenade advertisements scattered all across Pandora and Elpis. Today is your chance to make the most important decision of your life. Buy a Pangolin shield. Say hello to a future tomorrow. Say hello to a Pangolin shield. Pangolin, safety first. Pangolin, protect your hide. Whilst Pangolin do make mainly shields, they also weirdly make class mods for Vault Hunters in Borderlands 1, 2 and the pre-sequel. However, no class mod in Borderlands 3 has a manufacturer at all, which leads me to believe that the class mods having manufacturers in their own games is all purely ease of use or something, and they don't actually make class mods in canon. I mean, apart from Krieg having basically all bandit, it makes no sense. Why would Pangolin make a clearly Dahl manufactured and designed class mod for Axton that gives him more health? That goes against everything that the brand has been shown to represent and make. Brick also has the same thing in Borderlands 1, with the Pangolin class mod increasing health, but like every other brand changed between the events of Borderlands 1 and 2, so once again, it doesn't really mean much. The way Moxie advertised Pangolin also adds more proof to my argument, as she only talks about buying shields. The only one where she's even slightly vague is the Pangolin safety first, but honestly, you could apply that for manufacturers that make literally anything and it's still relevant. Much like S&S, there's no evidence at all to point in the direction of Pangolin having any sort of military operation, and if they did, they would be extremely fucked as they don't produce firearms of any kind. Aside from that, Pangolin still remains extremely quiet and low-key, with a lot of gaps that could be filled in with any kind of new information going forward. Honestly, there's not enough info to piece together anything about this company. They're pretty much an entirely blank slate to be worked on if Gearbox ever decided to. We have no idea who they are, how big they are, who the CEO is, nothing. I did mention a potential poisoning/using life as an energy source thing, which is an extremely interesting premise for a company and enemy type. Concepts for a potential Pangolin military have been very interesting, with a focus more on defense and passiveness, having thick armor and a slow way of engaging in combat and inducing damage. Considering there's not much to go off, it's quite impressive what people can think of. It's easy to send the mind into a flurry of ideas as to how Pangolin would operate as an opposing force, and it's really cool to see what people think. Feel free to speculate yourself also. When the storm winds blow, the unyielding branches break, as gentle reeds bend, Anshin shields have a shield for every situation. Anshin, unbroken. Up until very recently, the company of Anshin also had little to nothing known about them, with barely any lore relevance, little to no advertising, and no military presence in the universe, as far as the population of Pandora knew anyway. Much like Pangolin, Anshin produce mainly shields, but also took to producing transfusion grenades not long after they popped up on Pandora many years ago. This ended up being a venture that they would not continue, however, as by the events of the second game, they had stopped producing grenades of any kind. They have seemingly switched from a mix of offensive and defensive equipment in the past to now prioritizing exclusively defensive over anything, in more ways than one. Their shields utilize a special and trademarked enhancement called adaptive technology. This term refers to the fact that any Anshin shield has the ability to absorb the element that it was last shot with, identify it within a fraction of a second, and gain immediate elemental resistance to that element. They only seem to utilize this tech in their equipment a few years after they started operating though, with a specific amount unknown, but we do know that the shields they used to sell operated on fast recharge rates instead. This technology they've developed shows that the company of Anshin is clearly very advanced with their operations, and possess some of, if not the most high-grade technology of all the manufacturers, which could add a lot of speculation to their apparent military force/operation. When it comes to the other products Anshin supply, they are also based around healthcare and general wellness. They famously make all of the Health Now products that you can find in all Dr. Zed and Nurse Nina vending machines in the Borderlands. An unexpected appearance of products Anshin supply are the customization stations, making all of the available PTM quick change machines scattered across every planet, meaning that they are also in the fashion business. My theory for how the internals of this business work is that they only make the default colour schemes for people to use, then let other brands and companies pay them so people can use the machines to apply their schemes too. A certain theory has arose of recent that Anshin are also in the robot making business, less similar to a company like Hyperion though. Anshin's logo throughout as many years remained a dull, yet slightly rugged basic piece of text, not really giving away any brand theme or style, but before the events of Borderlands 3 occurred, they decided to rebrand. This could not be any more different to their original branding and gave off a very ninja and samurai theme, linking to ties with Asian culture. Because of this bold rebranding of the company, many speculated that geisha bots had been manufactured and distributed by Anshin to planets and moons within the Borderlands. The only one that we have seen so far is named Serena, whose only appearance in the series has been on Elpis. Seeing as how she doesn't mix with any aesthetic of any other company, or really anything within the Borderlands universe that we've seen so far in general, it could be very much possible that Anshin were the ones behind her and many others like her. Since Serena is the only one we know of, it's unknown whether that is a brand name like Claptrap or merely an adopted one. At this time, however, it's not official, so take it however you want. It's safe to say that they definitely have a strong hold on the health market at the minimum and engage in business with many planets and companies vast distances away from each other at the max. This is clearly done in a very subtle manner too, with barely any advertisements around, only really being seen once again in Moxxi's Underdome. When it comes to a military backing within the company, nothing is official, with no spaceships, army, or any other lethal units of any kind ever being seen. The only link we do officially have towards Anshin potentially having some military presence is through Zane, who mentions that he used to do jobs for Anshin back in his Hitman days, and mentioning using a hollow jabber for a specific mission. The problem here is that it still doesn't link towards any proof of Anshin operating an army or military of any kind, only that they engage in malfeasance and bad practice, and speaking on technical terms, anyone could and has done that. It's Borderlands. We know that many characters in the universe have asked multiple Vault Hunters to kill someone or something specifically, and gives you a reward for that. So it sounds like the definition of a hit being given out, not a military backing or presence, to me. It makes them come across as shady at the least, but honestly, when looking at all these companies, there's not really one that comes off as any less either, aside from maybe S&S ironically. When it comes down to the way this military could potentially look, the speculation is a lot more interesting than Pangolin, as their logo hints to a very Asian design. This could lead to things such as mechs and ninja-style robots and human being a part of their forces and engaging in melee combat. This would make the most sense, seeing as how samurai are known for their melee prowess, Anshin make great shields with extremely high technological prowess, and they also make no other weaponry of any kind. If you want to include Serena and other geisha bots as part of headcanon too, then it's easy to look for her for inspiration as how Anshin could potentially come across. Little reasoning is actually given as to why the companies such as Anshin haven't really been expanded upon at all. One could assume it's to do with giving the spotlight to the other corporations that the developers could really sink their creative juices into, but I don't know. Anshin probably just didn't jump out to anyone in particular as a major threat or particularly interesting subject to cover in the grand scope of the universe. But still, you've created these companies, you've at least updated their logo to something more interesting. Give us something, Gearbox, please. A general improvement on the companies that have come before, Jakobs is a slightly more established and well-known corporation than the ones previously mentioned. We only truly come to find out more intricate details about the Jakobs family and their overall involvement with the universe during and after the events of Borderlands 3, mainly due to being able to visit the home planet of the family itself and the current residency of the now Jakobs CEO, Wainwright. The Jakobs family has been assembling quality firearms for over 300 years. And although the world has changed quite a lot since Montgomery's father bolted on the sandalwood grip of the company's first revolver, our family tradition and commitment to building a superior product is still as true as ever. The employees at Jakobs may not all share the same last name anymore, but we're still family, and we want you to join us. When you invest in the Jakobs, you're not only getting the most powerful firearm money can buy, you're also joining the biggest family of satisfied gun owners the world over. Whether you're shouldering one of our renowned rifles or staring down the barrel of one of our timeless pistols, you can be sure each and every shot packs the reliability and strength that only a Jakobs can offer. Being your cut-and-dry Western stereotype company, Jakobs focuses mainly on your typical tropes, bolt-action snipers, revolvers, and break-action double-barrel shotguns. They are also known to venture down less obvious Western-style paths, such as the production of wheel guns, Gatling rifles, and semi-automatic snipers. In 99% of cases, they also steer clear of any sort of elemental weaponry, representing a simpler time in munition production where silly little things like fire and electricity were things you would cook your dinner with, not your enemies. They do not mass-produce shields, however. One special shield with the name of the Rough Rider somehow did make it to development though. It uses the chassis of Pangolin's trademark turtle shields and functions in a similar manner to Anshin's adaptive technology, as it grants resistance and health bonuses to the welder. This provides a convincing reason for why the concept and Jakobs shields in general clearly never made it past the prototype stages, as they essentially ripped two separate companies off and had nothing new to offer. Anshin had certainly gotten wind of this concept and had taken it from Jakobs, as you can officially obtain the Rough Rider again, though this time under the Anshin name and not the Jakobs one. The presents that Jakobs have in and around the universe aren't just in the way of weaponry, however, as they are seen to provide some sort of fuel or fueling system throughout all of Pandora and Eden 6, with many tankers scattered all across the planet branded with the Jakobs logo. It's unknown whether they merely provide the tankers and pump systems or the actual fuel itself, but it wouldn't be beyond the company as they do produce their own gunpowder and whiskey, so making some sort of oil or fuel source isn't beyond thought. Jakobs seem to have a hand in real estate as well, as hinted by a faded billboard spotted along the highways in the secret armory of General Knox. The sign advertises "For Rent, Mad Scientist Laboratory," suggesting that even the most eccentric Pandorian tenants can find a place to call home courtesy of Jakobs. The Jakobs Corporation prides itself on a long-standing family history and line of CEOs that span back generations. Being the initial founder of the company and great-grandfather to current CEO Wainwright, Singleton Talbot Jakobs had been described as an obsessively detail-oriented man with a responsibility on his shoulder and pride in his step. Singleton was unfortunately shot in the face by a robber while distracted by the bore of the robber's rifle, leaving the company to its son and second CEO, Wharton Jakobs. Wharton was the first Jakobs to break tradition by selling firearms to customers without mustaches, steering the company towards galactic success. However, his legacy was also marked by an insatiable greed and controversial views on trucks and immigration. His life came to a rather unfortunate end when he suffered a fatal accident in his factory, officially recorded as fatal testicular devastation. Wharton's younger brother Maddox and great-uncle to Wainwright Jakobs had never been stated to want any involvement with the family business, almost the exact opposite in fact. He was seen to be extremely paranoid about the relation he had to his family and the last name he possessed, to the point of almost insanity. He hired constant protection from potential threats and was so busy trying to find as many people as he could to protect him, he stopped worrying about who was protecting him, being murdered by his very own butler, ironically, the man he came to trust the most. Montgomery Jakobs, the son of Wharton, the third CEO of Jakobs and the CEO for the entirety of Borderlands 1, 2 and the pre-sequel, upheld the company's long-standing traditions while maintaining smooth operation for decades. During the first years of his ownership, Monty met his future wife Margaret, who was said to take no guff off nobody. They swiftly married and spent many years together, having one son, Wainwright Jakobs. Later in life, Margaret was regrettably brought to her death due to unknown circumstances. The news was devastating, and to commemorate her, a pistol known as the Maggie was handcrafted by Monty himself, being painted in her favourite colour, purple. Though his relationship with his son Wainwright was strained after this, he remained dedicated to the family legacy, keeping it maintained even in Margaret's absence. Aware of a vault hidden on Eden 6, but determined to keep it a secret, Montgomery Jakobs hired the legendary vault hunter Typhon de Leon. Monty didn't actually want Typhon de Leon to find the vault and truly believed that he actually couldn't, but when Typhon succeeded anyway, Montgomery threatened him with death to maintain the cover-up. His reign came to a brutal end when Tyreen Calypso murdered him during breakfast at the Jakobs estate, paving the way for Aurelia Hammerlock to briefly take control of the company on behalf of the COV. After Aurelia was defeated and Eden 6 was taken back from the Children of the Vault, Montgomery's son and rightful CEO of Jakobs took over. Wainwright. Wainwright Jakobs, the only son of Montgomery and Margaret Jakobs, is the fourth and current CEO of the Jakobs Corporation. Born with poor eyesight, he once believed himself unworthy of the family's gunslinging legacy due to a lack of firearm experience. This changed, however, when the legendary Typhon de Leon encouraged him to embrace the use of shotguns instead, leading him to gain a much-needed passion for running the corporation. Wainwright came to develop a romantic relationship with hunter and Jakobs specialist Alistair Hammerlock, whom he'd seemed to have a lot in common with. They seemed to manage the company well together and could keep business separate from private affairs. This led them to make wed on the planet of Xylurgos only a few years later. There are also two other members of the Jakobs family that are involved with the mailing system of Jakobs. Sullivan Cornelius Jakobs II, described as the co-director of Extended Family Outreach, and Agatha T. Fitzwallace Jakobs, also described as co-director of Extended Family Outreach. Their relation to Wainwright Jakobs is unknown, however, as Monty and Maggie only had one child in Wainwright himself, and other brothers and sisters have either died or not been mentioned at all. My theory is that these are either cousins or step-siblings related to Maggie Jakobs that also took the name, or some distant relatives that never came up in the main family tree got involved. Either way, they are involved in family relations and the Jakobs mailing system, so they must hold some importance to the family. When it comes to the military presence of the Jakobs Corporation, it seems that none is or has ever been present. Considering the sheer size of the company, that is quite concerning, but also not really surprising. They have clearly wanted to keep everything family oriented and in a small, tight-knit circle, and having an army trouncing about wouldn't hold them to their own moral values. It's also not surprising, as it only took a small army to land on the Jakobs estate to pretty much take the entire company from Wainwright, to the point of having to call the Crimson Raiders and involved Vault Hunters to take back the company. Any military that he could have, he should have and probably would have used at that point, but no one showed up, and nothing was said about the force that Jakobs has. The only true force that Jakobs do actually have is their workforce, which mainly focused on the area that Jakobs owns on Pandora, known as Jakobs Cove. This is a wood mill that chops and shapes the wood for their weaponry, which is then seemingly shipped somewhere else. To where can only be speculated at this point, but it could realistically be said for most companies. As the Jakobs Cove itself is many years old, it could also be theorised that production has been permanently moved to the planet of Eden 6 for larger ventures and ease of use, but once again, that's just speculation. Jakobs are extremely interesting as a company and are relatively tame in terms of production and general expansion as a company. They know what they're good at and they stick to it. They don't want to get involved with external ventures too much and stay grounded to the initial family-based roots that they were founded upon. It's also amazing to go into a lot of detail with more intricate lore points with this company, because there's a lot of family-based stuff that can specifically be talked about in very large detail, and it's really refreshing to have a company with deep established lore, but also comprehensive lore that doesn't have any stupid plot holes or missed out points. It all seems to fit together well, and it's one of the only companies that will be like this, and I applaud Gearbox for that. I like the stance of being very tight-knit and not over the top too. It's super on brand for a company like Jakobs to have. I mean, their biggest threats pertain to having marriage trouble or help me take my estate back please, I have no army to protect it, and not some doomsday everything will be blown up, we have 10,000 robots and a massive weapons thing. I like it. An explosive company which on the surface has everything known about it, but is shrouded in mystery below. The Torgue Corporation is the epitome of branding and mascot, shielding deep and dark entities underneath. Less than subtle hints point towards a beloved Mr. Torgue Flexington not actually being the CEO of the company anymore, or engaging with business conduct. The following message from Mr. Torgue does not reflect the opinions of the Torgue Corporation itself. That is heard on radio advertisements all across Pandora, hinting that the Torgue Corporation's identity is shielded by the image of a fun-loving company with a more than humorous CEO. Well, that is far from the case. When the Vault Hunters decide to take part in the Hunger for Violence extravaganza hosted by Mr. Torgue himself, they discover the real string pullers of the Torgue Corporation, and more so that Mr. Torgue himself is only a mascot for the company, being kept on for PR reasons only. It's stated that Mr. Torgue sold the company to these board of directors not long after developing the Kablaster for the hefty price of $12 and a high five. He was later dropped from the company for threatening to kill and eat the invincible water gobbler, a large turkey-like creature whom the company were making a lot of money out of. It's unknown as to whether the board actually went through with the decision, as he seemingly still represents them in Borderlands 3 and in new Tales from the Borderlands, which leads me onto another plot hole missed by developers. Torgue now apparently just owns the company again, appearing in a CEO meeting during a cutscene in New Tales from the Borderlands. Considering he probably hadn't been close to being a CEO for the company for years at that point and was seemingly fired from the company by its actual CEO, President Smith, it's odd he would appear as a CEO again. Now, on the real, as far as I'm concerned, this whole scene with the CEO during Tales 2 just didn't happen. There's so much wrong with it to the point of bordering on a poor attempt at a joke, I just cannot consider it canon. After the pre-sequel, it honestly comes off as if the developers and writers just forgot who and what the universe's overall lore was, but once again, I'll get into it more later. The only way this whole thing makes sense is if the whole Hunger for Violence extravaganza never happened and is a non-canon event in the universe, but I'd hate to have to use that as a cope for his story to make sense. In keeping with the skepticism and lore-based reasoning for how Torgue came about and its involvement in the games, I have to mention a potential plot hole to do with how the company was handled prior to its main gimmick in CEO being brought into the wider Borderlands lore as a whole. It's stated that Mr. Torgue Flexington founded the company with the goal to make explosive weaponry that doesn't harm the user, as quoted from his grandma during a long story. It's also stated by President Smith that he developed the gun tech, then sold it to President Smith himself. Well, if that's the case, why are Torgue guns we first see on Pandora not explosive at all? But not only that, completely different from any kind of Torgue weapon we come to know later on. I obviously do know why it's a thing, but it's interesting to speculate as to why the guns are so much different than Torgue's original vision at first. My headcanon for all of this is that he was developing the tech still during the events of Borderlands, but hadn't fully mastered it yet, so just sold something that would get his foot through the door, then introduced the tech later on. I also think that the Kablaster was the sort of Django Fett of Torgue weapons, being the foundations for what Torgue would make tech like moving forwards. That is just what my theory is though, leave yours down below. It's always an interesting topic to discuss. The Torgue Corporation sort of has a military, but not in the way you would think. In true Torgue fashion, it basically just consists of regular blue-collar workers who've been given a shotgun and been told to play ball. In the words of Mr. Flexington himself, "Fuck it, give everybody guns. We lost half of our workforce in 3 days, but who gives a f***?" Whilst not technically a military in the same way as other companies, as in suited up, organised soldiers, it seems as if the Torgue personnel can and will be equipped with any random weapons at any time of day, and will just start instantly killing everything in sight, which sounds like a military to me. Torgue's army has also been seen hacking into Hyperion loader bots, turning them into their own messed up little creations. Whether Mr. Torgue himself even knows his robot army exists is unknown. Yeah, I'm sure he'd probably find it cool as shit and ask for more guns to be strapped onto them because why not? In terms of looks, it's basically what you would expect. Engineers, bikers and buff dudes wearing tank tops and spiky bits, all coloured in orange and yellow and wearing funny hats. Armour is clearly not the main priority here like other armies, mostly due to the fact that all of them are semi-normal workers who have been given assault rifles. Torgue as a corporation is one of the more confusing middle ground companies when it comes to what we actually know about companies and what we don't. And it seems like the people who are responsible for showing off more information about them have not only forgotten to expand on their lore, but somehow managed to mess up the previously pre-established lore we had to work with. We don't find out anything significant relating to Torgue after the events of Borderlands 2, which is a shame. I would love to dive more into the shady dealings going on behind the more goofy and fun persona that the Torgue Corporation shows off on the surface, much like what we experienced during the Hunger for Violence extravaganza. But for now, this is all we seemingly have, and will get involving the deep secrets of the Torgue Corporation. Tediore was founded on the principle that no family should be without the protection that an affordable, lightweight firearm provides. Whether you're planning on taking little Billy out to the fields for his first pheasant hunt, or you need to chase some trouble off your front porch, Tediore will be there for you. Over the years, Tediore has built a reputation among the working class men and women of this land for providing fast reloading weapons that anyone, on any budget, can afford. So the next time you're headed down to the Save and Save, why not put a little peace of mind in the cart and grab yourself a Tediore? Tediore's pistols, shotguns, submachine guns and rifles can be found at major retailers nationwide. Up until extremely recently, Tediore was known pretty much only for their wacky and outlandish gun mechanics and give a shit attitude toward manufacturing, providing us with a slight insight to how the company operated. Across the wider known universe, Tediore was branded as that weapons company that is somehow still in business, being pretty much the laughingstock of the weapons making industry. More recent events have seemingly tarnished that idea, with a grumpy yet competent CEO, a military seemingly on par with that of Dahl's, and no Mrs. Tediore to be found. Known for a wide variety of offensive and defensive equipment, Tediore produced every type of equipment you could think of, with shields, guns and grenades all being part of Tediore's large market of armaments. They also produced the weaponry seen on top of the Outrunner vehicles. Once again, they also produce class mods, but for potential canonical reasons, I'm separating the classification between these and their legitimate businesses in universe. When thinking of this company, you think about one thing: cheap. Tediore is all about being the go-to brand for the everyday person, offering affordable equipment that are easy to get your hands on, made in an inexpensive way, with plastic parts and bland colours. Their marketing style reflects this, focusing on family-friendly messaging and reminding customers how cheap their firearms are, often encouraging bulk purchases. Tediore guns are so inexpensive that you could buy several of them for the price of just one gun from another top brand. Tediore weapons are usually the least expensive in Marcus's vending machines, with Marcus himself having disdain towards Tediore as a brand, but no refunds means that defunct models mean little to nothing to him. While their budget-friendly designs mean their equipment is worse in general to other corporations, the unique and quirky reload technology is a lifesaver. When your main weapon runs dry, having a fully loaded backup can be a game changer. The guns themselves are made from cheap, lightweight materials like plastic or fiberglass, unlike other companies that use metal or wood. In the Borderlands games, this throwaway nature of Tediore guns becomes obvious starting with Borderlands 2, where their weapons don't have visible magazines. Once the ammo runs out, the gun is tossed aside and explodes. Tediore doesn't play a major role in the story across the series as a whole. There aren't many missions involving them, you never meet their leaders, and they're not portrayed as villains until Tales from the Borderlands 2, which could also be argued had no reason to happen. Still, their reputation for cheap products often leads to some ridicule in Borderlands 3. Both Reese and Katagawa Jr. mentioned Tediore as a company they'd be embarrassed to lose to. Claptrap even recalls a story about another Claptrap unit's wheels melting while dating a Tediore shotgun. Montgomery Jakobs bought a Tediore-made navigation AI, Balex, to save money after spending most of his funds on a Maliwan AI. Balex ended up causing trouble, leading to the crash of the Jakobs flagship, the Family Jewel. Timothy Lawrence, who'd been stuck on the handsome jackpot for several years, wonders if Tediore is even still in business. The fact that Tediore also manufactures ladders, of all things, reinforces corporations not taking them seriously. Yes, people need ladders, but it's hard to take a company seriously as a military threat if the logos shared with an entire military are also shared by ladders. Tediore and its chairwoman, Susan Caldwell, take on a more prominent role in the corporate war with their military presence on Promethea, where they play a key part in controlling a large section of the planet and its residents, as well as looking for a potential new vault on the planet. The problem in canon is how Tediore as a company and a military is handled and operates. There's also a question to motivation and their overall goals within the grand scheme of things, and why they, over many other companies, decided to involve themselves in the story of Tales from the Borderlands 2 and the takeover of Promethea as a whole. The military of Tediore is fairly large and has an abundance of equipment at their disposal. Seeing as how they produce pretty much every type of ordnance, it makes a lot of sense that they operate on a larger scale and with some amount of success. They are pretty tame as a presence though, having no involvement with any other armies and anything to do with major events in the Borderlands universe. One could argue that they hadn't yet been developed as a company enough after the events of the first game and before the third. Their gun technology hadn't been created, or at least innovated upon yet, and no one seemed to take them seriously as a weapons and equipment manufacturer, let alone as a military force. When it comes to looks, the soldiers of Tediore have a dark colour scheme, boxy design to the suits, and an uncharacteristic approach to the helmets. They are universally known for trying to save money at every corner, so it's extremely strange that the helmets look far too expensive for something that Tediore would ever make, especially for a group of people that are supposed to be expendable and easily replaceable. The soldiers themselves seem to be utterly incompetent, which is actually on brand for Tediore, and definitely what I imagine them to be like. It makes you wonder how they even get anything done in the first place, let alone have a force to occupy entire planets. It seems clear that they would stand no chance against most other corporations in potential military war, especially against old powerhouses such as Dahl or Atlas. Mrs. Tediore here. I'm not going to tell you that spending inexorbitant amounts of money on weapons with silly features like elemental tech or increased damage will break the bank, leaving you so poor you're incapable of buying food, shelter, or medicine when you need it most, to the point where your desire for excessive personal protection ironically results in your own death. I'd never say that. I'm simply here to suggest that Tediore's weapons are so cheap that you could easily buy an entire arsenal and still have enough money left to say, buy a car, buy a house, not starve to death. Tediore. Because breaking your enemies shouldn't break the bank. Apart from very small instances here or there, we haven't really heard or seen from the company of Vladof, at least until very recently when Mose was introduced to us. They were always known as a culmination of Eastern European and specifically Russian origins, taking slight inspiration from USSR designs, propaganda and morals. Other than Jakobs, Vladof is probably the most true-to-life brand out there, as it specifically takes notes from things that exist in our world already and put a spacey and slightly autistic switch on them. That also translates to its weaponry for the most part, looking the most plausible to actually exist in real life and work as intended, with exceptions of course, dual-action spinny barrels and the whatnot. This also literally translates from real life, with the actual Soviet Union national anthem playing over Vladof advertisements that run frequently on the radio and throughout the EchoNet. Vladof are a part of the big boys club, but not the top 3 I mentioned. They're sort of in the same boat as Maliwan, but we'll get onto those later. They provide every single type of offensive and defensive equipment you could think of. Guns, grenade mods, shields, you name it. They take themselves very seriously and have one of the largest budgets of any manufacturers, as far as we found out anyway. They don't play around and have a more advanced weaponry system than we've been led to believe in the past. Case in point is the mech suit Iron Bear, which is also fully developed by Vladof, being part of their armoured Ursa Corps program. The Ursa Corps itself is one of the only officially named military operations from all of the large corporations in the universe, and the only one in Vladof that's known so far. It consists of a mechanized bipedal 15-ton Iron Bear mechs, and involves soldiers like Mose dropping into battles that are borderline unwinnable and trying to reverse the tide. Vladof themselves have made a contract system for these soldiers, claiming that after enough battles, they are free to venture elsewhere and can even take their mechs with them. The corporation of Vladof runs a strict regime, however, manipulating and deceiving their troops. It promises freedom and a life away from the military and combat, yet repeatedly argues the contract of the soldiers and that they haven't been fulfilled, before dropping them into one more mission that ends up being a bloodbath and spells the end for them. The true military might of Vladof is unknown apart from this very specific regiment of their army, but one thing's for sure, they definitely have one, and a large one at that. To say that if you can have multiple separate divisions dedicated to basically dropping into suicide missions, multi-million-dollar mechs specifically built and deployed to deal with said situations, and contracts led by generals that force you to go on and on until you end up being dead somewhere is the true power of a megacorporation and a mighty military. A look for this army would most likely be similar to Mose's design, with inspirations from 1980s Soviet military pieces. It's worth keeping in mind that Mose was part of a specific unit and not the general army, so this could be a specialised design and not the look of your generic soldier, but something in that ballpark would definitely be accurate. Mose also has access to a commissar's uniform, showing what the higher-ups would most likely be seen wearing on duty. The black design with the Vladof logo seen on a CO's hat shows how uniforms can be dark but have a contrast to red all over, giving leeway to a very interesting concept art, almost looking like something out of Killzone mixed with Titanfall, which I'm a big fan of. Long winter coats for Ushanka hats, rustic looking equipment, the possibilities for a Vladof army is huge, and I hope that they do turn up in future to show their military might. Now, let's talk about this Big Three equation and why I think they're not technically in it as well as Maliwan. So, unlike the Big Three, and like Maliwan itself, is the fact that we haven't really seen any of Vladof's military at all, and hell, the only reason we really know anything apart from their propaganda adverts is because of Mose and her background with the Ursa Corps. The fact that Mark has pretty much instantly clocked that Mose was a mech soldier and from the Ursa Corps tells me that Vladof's military operation is at least somewhat well known. It's most likely that Vladof is caught up in a war far beyond the border planets, a war not with rival corporations or rogue elements, but with something or someone far outweighing anything that has caught interest to other corporations that have visited Pandora and neighbouring planets. The universe is massive, and there's no saying what the industrial might of Vladof is pursuing right now, and whether one day it might find its way into a battle we'll get involved with ourselves is unknown. The leader, or CEO, of at least the Vladof army is known simply as Comrade Vladof. Whether this is a stage name like Torgue, or if Vladof is actually his last name is unknown. However, it seems to be the only high command name we are given to put together as to who actually runs this company. Other than that, nothing is known of him. Yeah, you aren't getting a detailed list of successors like Jakobs here. Vladof is very simplified. Whilst not on the level of Dahl in terms of branding, especially on planets Dahl occupied, such as Pandora, Vladof have been seen advertising themselves on posters scattered all over, as well as previously mentioned radio and television advertisements. They don't heavily promote, but when they do, they are sure to make an impression. Maliwan is one of the most, if not the most, technologically advanced and stylistically distinct weapons and military manufacturers in the entire Borderlands universe. Known for their cutting-edge elemental technology and sleek weapon designs, Maliwan has carved out a powerful position in the Hyperion and Dahl-dominated galactic weapons market. The company's roots and operational philosophy set it apart from its more utilitarian or militaristic competitors, making it a favourite among those who value both form and function in their armaments. Founded long before the events on Pandora that led to the vault's opening, Maliwan's history is steeped in corporate ambition and scientific innovation. While the exact date of its founding has not been revealed, it is understood to have merged as the newest Big Three weapon corporation currently operating within the Borderlands galaxy, taking it away from the former Atlas Corporation that has recently made a comeback. From the outset, Maliwan focused on elemental weapons technology, levering all of the elements to create stylish and devastating alternatives to traditional basic weaponry. Unlike companies such as Jakobs, which pride themselves on raw power and old-fashioned design, Maliwan went for a futuristic, high-tech aesthetic, glowing weapons, smooth lines, bright colours and polished finishes. They also seem to produce absolutely everything: weapons, shields, grenade mods, mechs, actual shields, swords, police bots, posters, it goes on. Combat is an art. Maliwan weapons are the paint. Our elemental tech transforms the battlefield from a cacophony of idiocy into a masterpiece of destruction. The unwashed hordes will burn and fry and melt into a portrait of exquisite death. Maliwan. Beauty through destruction. Maliwan tech is notable for always featuring elemental damage, making them especially potent against every enemy that a lone survivor could come across. This emphasis on elemental specialization reflects Maliwan's core philosophy: precision and efficiency over brute force. As a result, Maliwan gear is favoured by enthusiasts who prioritise the natural elements doing their job over a lead bullet piercing the head. By the time Hyperion arrived on Pandora, Maliwan was a well-established name, though it operated more quietly compared to dominant players like Hyperion or even Dahl. Maliwan's reputation continued to grow behind the scenes, especially in the scientific and military circles, where its tech is admired and sometimes even feared. As of recent, the company had taken a bold and aggressive turn, becoming one of the primary antagonists to go up against the Crimson Raiders and even a planet itself. Maliwan's then CEO, Katagawa Jr., attempted a hostile corporate takeover of the planet Promethea, which leads to a direct conflict with the Atlas Corporation. This marks a significant shift in Maliwan's role in the time, from a respected weapons brand to a frontline villainous power engaging in open warfare. Maliwan's CEO up until very recently was called Katagawa Jr. Very little is known about the Maliwan family and who ran the company before his father Katagawa Sr., so safe to say once again, Jakobs leads the way in the copious lore surrounding the background of leadership. Junior, who was mad with power, tried to seize every last asset that Promethea and other planets had to offer, even to the point of staging an invasion on the Atlas headquarters. His leadership revealed deep fractures within the corporation. Obsessed with outmaneuvering competitors and gaining personal power, he betrayed corporate ethics and even cloned himself to micromanage operation. His defeat at the hands of the Vault Hunters signified the collapse of Maliwan's short-lived militaristic expansion, but the company's legacy and advanced weaponry remain widely used across the galaxy. After this, his father Katagawa Sr. seemed to take over the company again, with him being seen in a CEO meeting between the corporations. Personally, however, I will leave this as headcanon, as anything significant that comes out of Tales from the Borderlands 2 I deem as false lore. Maliwan's army, while not seen before the events that transpired on Promethea, is vast and very technologically advanced, and argued to be the most advanced military bar none in the current universe. Whilst Hyperion would have probably outnumbered and out-egoed them in their heyday, that has long been disestablished, especially after Handsome Jack was destroyed and Helios was brought down. Dahl is contested as the largest and most significant military fleet that has ever graced the universe, but the scientific prowess and modernism of Maliwan possesses is bar none. I mean, look at the mechs they provide compared to Vladof, for example. Vladof's may have more of a rough and rugged structure and hold a lot more firepower, but the Maliwan counterparts are larger, more aggressive, more varied, and more equipped. I'd personally love to see a galactic war between all the largest companies in their heyday to see what would come of it, but maybe that's never going to come. Dahl versus Hyperion is the closest we may ever get. It was mentioned before that Maliwan's technology sprouts into all sorts of different avenues, and that cannot be more true than the corrupt police force that Maliwan had stationed on Promethea. In fact, it goes much deeper than that. Gage DiMartino, an avid robot enthusiast who fled from her home planet of Eden 5, made a concept robot simply called Project TT. Her classmate, with the name Marcy Holloway, went on to steal her entire concept, use it for her own, and win a science fair held by Gage's school. This robot was the first edition of Gage's Project DT, and was rumoured to have been sold to Maliwan, and then the Promethean police force, led by Marcy Holloway's father. It's not confirmed by any sources, but there are conspiracies wandering around on the Echo. Despite its turbulent history, Maliwan continues to symbolise the apex of elemental weaponry and design sophistication. Its impact on Pandora and beyond is undeniable, with vault hunters, bandits and civilians alike frequently wielding its luminous, stylish and deadly firearms. In a universe driven by chaos and corporate greed, Maliwan stood out as a brand that, however flawed, brought art history to an industry built on destruction. What its future will entail is yet to be seen, but hopefully my favourite company can make a comeback. Now, the next three I deemed as the big three and are all huge in their own respective ways. So I didn't really know which one to cover last and which one first, so I think I will just go in order by which one I personally think had or has the largest impact on the industrial corporate war in Borderlands. Where to even start with these three companies? So I thought I'd go with Hyperion. Hyperion is one of the most powerful and infamous corporations in the Borderlands universe, a symbol of technological prowess, brutal efficiency, and corporate greed. Previously headquartered on the massive and now fatally crashed Helios space station that orbited Pandora, Hyperion is still instantly recognisable for its sharp, angular aesthetics, distinctive yellow and white branding, and its militarised robot army. While it does produce weapons, shields, grenade mods, AI systems, militaries, and interplanetary infrastructure, Hyperion is best remembered for its catastrophic involvement in Pandora's fate and the reign of its most infamous CEO, Handsome Jack. Though Hyperion existed prior to the events of the initial vault opening, it operated largely behind the scenes. In the early days, the company, like many others, turned its attention to Pandora after rumours surfaced about a mysterious alien vault filled with advanced technology and untold riches. Attracted by the potential for profit and power, Hyperion began investigating heavily in this planet, establishing a foothold and constructing the Helios space station to oversee operations. During this time, Hyperion's weaponry was already known for its reliability and high-tech design, but the corporation itself has not risen to the prominence or infamy it would later achieve. Much like many a company, the developers for Borderlands don't give us much to go on to provide a complete roster of CEOs for Hyperion, but it gives us enough insight to sketch the significant leadership transitions that shape corporations' rise and fall, especially around the time of Handsome Jack's rise. Before Jack took over and became the face, brains and the brawns of the company, Hyperion appears to have been run by a more traditional corporate board of executives. These leaders were relatively faceless and nameless within the canon, emphasizing the impersonal, bureaucratic nature of megacorporations in the Borderlands universe. During this period, Hyperion was still a powerful weapons and tech manufacturer, but it had no presence on Pandora. It was insanely limited. It functioned more like a typical interstellar megacorporation, profit-driven, risk-averse, and focused on long-term expansion rather than direct intervention. Hell, the only real face that anyone seemed to even encounter from Hyperion during and after the events of the first game was Mr. Blake, who was, and seemingly is, still the Senior Vice President of Mercenary Relations and Tourism for the Hyperion Corporation. Jack himself initially worked within this structure as a mid-level programmer and software developer, not a high-ranking executive. He was intelligent, ambitious, and deeply manipulative, traits that eventually allowed him to climb the corporate ladder under the guise of loyalty and innovation. As Pandora's Vault became more significant to Hyperion's strategic interests, Jack began positioning himself as the man with the vision and the means to deliver results. Through manipulation and brute force, he seizes control of Helios and consolidates his authority. Initially portraying himself as a pragmatic saviour, Jack's personality begins to unravel as his actions grow more violent and dictatorial. With the forced integration of his daughter, Angel, into Helios' AI systems, Jack crosses a moral threshold from which there is no return. Under his leadership, Hyperion is transformed into a fascist regime, one that claims to bring order to Pandora by exterminating bandits, vault hunters, and any other form of resistance. It's no question that Jack did do some right for the company, however, having multiple moments that actually helped save Elpis and all of the lives on it. He also single-handedly made Hyperion's dominant robot army, turning next to useless loaders and even a claptrap unit into weapons to be feared. A few years after the opening of the first vault, Hyperion's presence on Pandora became overwhelming. The company operated as an occupying force, deploying robot armies known as loaders, establishing surveillance infrastructure, and constantly broadcasting propaganda from orbit. Jack, now firmly entrenched as Hyperion's face and voice, declares himself the planet's ruler. His obsession with unlocking a second vault, this one containing the warrior, became his downfall, as constant events driven by anger and greed eventually led to his demise, being killed in a puddle of his own blood and tears by Lilith, the Firehawk. Now, you would think at this point that I am specifically talking about the story of Handsome Jack, and that's not the case, but it's extremely difficult to not talk about Hyperion as a company without talking about its long-reigning and most infamous CEO, being Jack himself. And now, the company itself does move on from Jack eventually, but once again, it does seem like I'm just talking about Jack, and to a certain extent, Hyperion is basically just Jack, and then after it sort of disappears, so it looks like I'm only ever talking about the story of Jack and how he died, but it's important to get this over with when it comes to Hyperion's backstory. Hyperion develops and deploys a range of technology, on point with what their brand represents, sleek and sophisticated. The moonshot cannon system was one of Hyperion's more infamous innovations, uses a massive catapult/grenade launcher to get equipment from orbit to the planet's surface, often with horrible but kind of funny consequences. Meanwhile, Helios served as both a fortress and a surveillance platform, its presence constantly looming in Pandora's sky like a watchful eye. Pandora itself also saw the introduction of an exclusive type of technology at the hands of Hyperion, resurrection. Though not seen in canon for obvious reasons, Hyperion developed this system previously utilised by Dahl, now known as the New U Station, providing a way for anyone who died to come back to life. At a cost, of course. You are also heavily mocked by the voice of Hyperion every time you come back from the land of the dead and pay them money. The military behind Hyperion is its largest asset by a mile, being the driving force behind how the company was able to absolutely dominate as soon as they went anywhere near Pandora. Not on the same technological level as Maliwan or the same heights as Dahl, but with the absolute brute force behind it. Hyperion's loader bots are its most common and utilised soldiers. These souped up repair bots can be instantly turned into a military loader in the press of a button. Each model is optimised for very different scenarios, with some even being equipped with advanced AI routines for sarcastic or mocking dialogue. The uniformity and brutality of the loaders serve as a chilling representation of Hyperion. Their presence ensures that Hyperion's control is not technological like Maliwan, but also psychological. Humans are also deployed to fight in the battlefield, with a mix of workers made to fight with weapons like engineers or specific units designed and approved to fight in battles like the cloaking sniper units. Either way, Hyperion's military is weirdly unlike any others. It doesn't have the fuck it give everybody guns attitude that Torgue has, and it doesn't have the full-on war, nobody's life matters, into the meat grinder attitude that Vladof has. Hyperion's military, for the most part, are seemingly just normal construction workers who have been made to fight for something or else. People and robots merely there to fix things that have then been told to turn into soldiers in the blink of an eye, which is kind of the most dystopian thing I can think of, to be honest, and is very on brand for Hyperion. The events following Jack's downfall are brutal for the company. Hyperion started to exist as a fractured shell of its former self. With Jack dead, the corporation fell into internal chaos. The once feared corporate hierarchy descended into power struggles and office politics. Amid this disintegration, a group of lower tier employees, including a company man named Reese, uncovered a part of Hyperion's past, Jack's AI subconscious. This spectral version of Jack attempted to manipulate events from beyond the grave, seeking to reassert control over Hyperion and resurrect his legacy. This subconscious was made by a mad Hyperion scientist called Nakayama, who was obsessed with Jack, much like every other Hyperion employee, and vowed to clone Jack's mind any way he could. Nakayama was killed before his invention was properly brought to fruition, but after Reese finds out on Nakayama's corpse, he accidentally lets Jack run free in his mind. Fortunately for everyone in the universe, Jack's subconscious is eventually destroyed by Reese after he inserts it into Helios itself and then crashes it into Pandora, resulting in the end of Hyperion's beloved space station, and Jack forever. As far as we know, anyway. The internal culture of Hyperion at this time is revealed in greater depth after Jack's death. It's a world defined by competition, betrayal, and blind loyalty to a long-dead dictator. The corporate structure incentivizes ambition at the expense of humanity, and employees are trained to see moral compromise as a form of professional advancement. Even in its long-due death, Hyperion remains a dangerous force, not because of the raw strength it once had, but because of its pure ideology. By the time the Calypso twins arrived, Hyperion was no longer a dominant force. The destruction of Helios and the death of Jack marked the company's effective end. Other corporations such as Maliwan and Atlas had stepped into the power vacuum, yet the legacy of Hyperion still lingers. Its technology remains all across Pandora, its broken infrastructure serves as ruins, and the memory of its reign endures as a lesson to other megacorporations. Civilians often speak of Hyperion with a mixture of fear and bitterness, acknowledging both its achievements and its atrocities. In the end, Hyperion stands as the most richly developed military corporation in the Borderlands universe, from both an in-game and lore perspective. It also gave us Handsome Jack. Its rise and fall one of the largest and lowest in the entire universe, apart from one I'm still yet to mention. Though it may no longer exist as a functional corporation as of recent, its legacy endures. Hyperion is remembered not just for what they made, not just for what it did, but for the opposite too. And that's why it deserves its name in the Big Three. A once long-forgotten company, the Atlas Corporation was a militaristic and interplanetary giant at its peak, and burned down to a forgotten rusty sign in the snow at its trough. Though having returned under the same alias, it is the same by name alone, with the Atlas we know now being a completely different entity to the once demonized mega-corporation and military outfit. The Atlas Corporation is one of the oldest and most well-known companies in the Borderlands universe. At one time, Atlas was one of the most powerful weapon makers in the galaxy. It became rich and powerful by selling high-tech guns and sending its private army into new planets to take control and look for valuable alien technology. Atlas first came to the planet Pandora after learning about mysterious alien ruins and the possible existence of a vault. Hoping to find and control this vault, Atlas sent in its private military group, the Crimson Lance, led by General Alfonso Knox. The Crimson Lance set up bases, searched for the vault, and kept other people off the planet by any means necessary. At this time, Atlas was well known for its powerful weapons, professional soldiers, and organised control. Its guns were some of the best available, designed with high damage, incredible precision, and donned a mostly white colour scheme. They also produced shields, grenade mods, and pretty much anything else you can get your hands on. Marcus, the guns dealer, has been quoted as saying, "Buy an Atlas and you too will know what it is like to hold the power of the gods in your hands." This could have been said out of pure monetary reasons, but there's a general tide that links Atlas weaponry with the pinnacle of design, at least at first. The military operations side of Pandora for Atlas did not go as well as planned. When the vault was finally opened, it didn't contain powerful technology. Instead, it held a monster called the Destroyer, which killed many people, including the Siren leading the entire operation, Commandant Steele. Atlas had invested huge amounts of money and troops into the mission, and the failure for them was absolutely devastating. The loss damaged Atlas's reputation and profits. Other corporations quickly took advantage, moving in on Pandora and stealing Atlas's remaining territory and tech. Within a short time, Atlas went from being a major galactic power to a dying company. Its soldiers were abandoned and its leaders disappeared. The Crimson Lance was left behind and began operating without orders, becoming more of a rogue militia than a real army. After the opening of the vault failed in tremendous fashion, Atlas had mostly retreated from Pandora. Its bases emptied, its soldiers scattered, and its influence all but vanished. It was seen that even high-ranking Atlas officers knew the company had fallen apart. General Knox, the leader of the entire Atlas military operation, was tired, frustrated, and aware that Atlas had left him and his men to die on Pandora. It's really unknown what happened to the Atlas that left the entire Pandoran operation to die, who was the CEO, and really who was anything to do with the behind-the-scenes operations that were going on. As far as we know, Knox was the last true standing leader, but even he had generals. Yes, we know of the 3rd Starborn Brigade with Lieutenant Kairos, Lieutenant Typhon, and Commander Ajax, but his commanding officer is the only real admiral we even knew who commanded Knox, Admiral Mikey, who was a 5-year-old due to the horrendous promotion system Atlas had, which Knox describes as goddamn nepotism. Knox was known for being a strong leader and skilled strategist, but by the time he's encountered by the Vault Hunters who killed the Destroyer, he's a broken man. Atlas was already falling apart, and Knox had been left in charge of a military force with no real direction or support. He was deeply disillusioned, tired of war, frustrated with Atlas leadership, and completely aware that his efforts were meaningless. Unlike other leaders from evil corporations we talked about, Knox wasn't evil or power-hungry. In fact, he hated his job and resented the orders he was given. He saw that Atlas was using him and the Crimson Lance's tools and was just waiting for the end to come. Despite his frustration, Knox still followed all orders, mainly because he didn't see a better option and felt trapped by duty. Knox's story here reflects how Atlas leadership had lost control completely. While the company's executives were still pushing for power and profit, they had stopped caring about the people doing all of the work. Soldiers like Knox were left to rot, stuck on a dangerous planet with no clear mission, and abandoned when things got too hard. Knox's story is a tragic failure, representing the downfall of Atlas from the inside out. In the end, Knox goes out like a man, dying fighting against the Vault Hunters, even though he clearly doesn't believe in the fight. He leaves behind a message saying how little he cared about the mission and that he wishes things had been different. His story adds emotional depth to the usually chaotic world of Borderlands and shows the human cost of corporate greed. Even though the company collapsed, Atlas technology was still highly valued by Vault Hunters. Their sleek design and strong firepower made them favourites, and people continued to search for old Atlas gear, which wasn't uncommon. In the ruins of its once great empire, Atlas still had a strong name in the world of weaponry. The story of Atlas picks up again a few years later, where we meet Reese, a former employee of Hyperion who dreams of becoming a powerful corporate leader. He discovers leftover Atlas tech, including a special AI robot named Gortys, which was designed to find vaults. As Reese and his team uncover more Atlas secrets, they learn that the company originally had alternate goals, not just to conquer, but to discover and understand. After the Gortys project was utilised to take out an entirely new vault monster, one never before seen at this scale, Reese decides to bring Atlas back to life, not as a war-focused company like before, but something better. He becomes the new head of the company and starts building it back up with a new vision. He wants Atlas to be smarter, more careful, and more humane than the Atlas previous. He's not perfect, however. He's still cocky and makes mistakes, but he tries to avoid the mistakes that destroyed Hyperion and the original Atlas in the first place. It's unknown how he became Atlas's CEO, however, or even wanted to start the company back up. The last time anyone saw him before he announced himself as the new leader of the broken company was with a mysterious girl in a bowler hat walking into a vault. It's also unknown why he would choose the name Atlas again. Considering the reputation of the company was pure negativity and hatred at this point, it must have taken a lot of effort to gain good public opinion and interest once again. Reese and Atlas decided to place its new headquarters on the city-covered planet Promethea, and the company started growing again under Reese's leadership. The new Atlas focuses on high-tech smart weapons like guns with tracking bullets and special targeting systems, and no longer relies on massive armies, instead choosing precision and strategy with a much smaller army. But things don't go smoothly. A rival company called Maliwan, known for its high-tech elemental weapons, decides to attack Promethea and tries to take over Atlas by force. The city turns into a war zone, and Reese fights to protect his company and people, but is outmatched and needs help. He teamed up with the Vault Hunters and the Crimson Raiders, who helped stop Maliwan's invasion and defeat one of Reese's biggest enemies, Katagawa Jr., a sneaky executive who wants to steal Atlas for himself. With the help of the Crimson Raiders, Atlas wins the war and survives. Reese continues leading the company, trying to balance his ambition with doing what's right. The new Atlas is still a weapons company, but it's no longer as ruthless as before. It's trying to build a better future, using technology to protect rather than destroy. Atlas's army, in both its original form and in its resurrection, is known as the Crimson Lance. The old Lance was made up of a larger and more technologically advanced military than the new one under Reese's command, and demanded a lot more respect when fighting against The army had things as simple as lancemen decked out head to toe in red themed attire, donning the iconic helmets we've come to know, to heaping masses of destruction known as Devastators, who are the Lance's mech units. Not on the same level as Maliwan in terms of advanced tech, at least now, but for the time, these Devastators were the height of reckoning and drove the Lance forward when taking over Pandora. The Lance also produced sentry guns mounted at encampments, laser walls of death, and large vehicles known as Lancers. These things were massive and much larger than any other vehicle Pandora had come to know. The Crimson's assassin units were the pinnacle of death for the Lance. These were made up of a group of highly trained women who were kidnapped early in childhood and tortured into being killing machines. Much like the Lance Royal Guard, who are the male equivalent to these assassins, are unrelenting, extremely well versed in fighting, and never give up, even in defeat. Because of how prestige the assassin squad actually was, it was only made up of a few units: Vulcana, Hera, Minerva, Ceresia, Helicon, and Athena. But after assassin Athena was ordered to attack a village and accidentally killed her sister in the process, promptly left this unit and went off the rails. They also produced lance units that would utilise turrets, known as Scorpios. Roland, an ex-lanceman turned rogue, was a part of the Crimson Lance's 114th Bouncer Division and managed to steal and reprogram a Lance Scorpio turret, utilising its enhanced abilities as his own. When the Lancer abandoned and General Knox was eventually killed, those left of the Crimson Lance soldiers were recruited by Roland to fight for another cause, the Crimson Raiders, giving any ex-Atlas mercenaries a reason to fight. These are completely separate from the new Crimson Lance run by Reese's Atlas. These units are very similar to the old Lance Soldier in design and utility, but make use of Atlas's new smart weapon systems to get the job done. The new Lance don't have anywhere near the militaristic grasp they used to have, and for good reason. Reese didn't want to focus on building a vast army like the old Atlas, keeping his units to a minimum. Sentry guns are still used in case of large-scale attacks, but other than that, the simple lancemen are as far as the new Atlas goes. With the Crimson Raiders and the Crimson Lance existing at the same time, it gives me a bit of solace knowing that the old Lancemen were still kicking long enough to fight alongside the new ones in Atlas's aid on Promethea. Atlas's journey is incredible, one of rise, fall, and rebirth. The original company was all about power, control, and war, and collapsed after failing to control the Vault, and ironically lost all of its power control and then decided to get the hell out. But Reese? Atlas starts over, smaller, smarter, and with a new purpose. They still make guns, and they still fight in wars, but try to avoid the cruelty and greed that wants to find it. We're on to the last one now. Being easily the largest, most impetuous and reckless force in the Borderlands universe, Dahl stands out as the pinnacle of the mega corporations, and easily had the largest foothold in the big three at the time. But why? Over vengeful and dominating forces like Hyperion and massive planetary invading conglomerates such as Atlas, why? One word: expansion. Dahl wasn't always a purely militarized company. Oh no. Once a titan among interstellar corporations, Dahl was known across the galaxy for its efficient approach to colonialization and resource extraction. At its peak, Dahl operated not only as a mining conglomerate, but as a corporate empire, expanding aggressively into the frontier systems where regulations were scarce and profit margins were huge. Among these ventures, one of the most infamous was their deep investment into a lawless world, known simply as Pandora. Its expansion was so efficient because Dahl arrived on Pandora long before most of its corporate rivals, lured by rumours of rare materials, wealth, and the possibility of finding ancient Iridian artifacts from remnants of a mysterious alien civilization. The company developed massive resources to establish infrastructure, building outposts, mining facilities, and entire settlements across the planet. They also created what would become some of Pandora's most iconic locations, including New Haven, Sanctuary, Stormblight Complex, the Dahl Memorial Dam, the Fridge, the Caustic Caverns, and even Tundra Express itself. Its expansion also drifted into Pandora's moon, Elpis, where Dahl seemingly made the entire moon habitable by building pretty much all its known infrastructure. We will get into that soon, however. On both Pandora and Elpis, you find yourself running upon a ton of Dahl products and advertisements, which in my eyes separates this company from any of the other mega corporations. They are everywhere. posters, weapon advertisements, propaganda, hovercrafts, rubbish bins, guns, shields, clothes, gunships, warships, warp drive buggies, mining cities, chests, power suits, hell, even entire military complexes in the mountains. Everything still has a Dahl logo plastered on it, even all these years later, which shows its true expansion and domination in the early years of its Pandoran occupation. From the beginning, Dahl's operations on Pandora were marked by their militarized style and pure domination of the planet. Unlike some other corporations that leaned on scientific teams or mercenaries, Dahl's presence was rooted in corporate military forces and penile labor. Prisoners were transported to Pandora in droves from interplanetary prisons and were forced to work in extreme, often fatal conditions. These conscripted workers formed the backbone of Dahl's operations and were kept in line by armed guards and mechanized enforcement. For a time, Dahl thrived, mining yields were strong, and rumours of alien vaults kept the investors hungry. The discovery of Iridian ruins deepened corporate interest, and soon the mission shifted from mere mining to straight-up vault hunting. Dahl poured funds into the research, diverting resources from their mining operations and placing more pressure on their workforce. Entire research divisions were established to decipher Iridian markings and hunt down these vault clues. But Pandora, as many companies would later learn, does not yield its secrets easily or safely. Dahl's obsession with the vault led to increasingly reckless excavation and archaeological campaigns, such as the tragic tale of security officer Elise Booth and her overseer Amelia Harchek. Entire teams vanished in the deserts, caverns, or were consumed by the planet's native wildlife and bandit clans. The Iridian vaults proved persuasive but elusive to the company, and the financial costs of the Pandoran operation began to outweigh the benefits Dahl could foresee. Meanwhile, the brutal conditions and authoritarian structure of Dahl and its workforce began to take its toll. Riots broke out among the prison labourers, whole sectors of the planet descended into chaos, Dahl's own soldiers were demoralised and overextended, and the overall situation was spiralling to the point of capital mutiny for the company. Faced with spiralling costs, uncontrollable labour uprisings, and the absence of any actual vault treasure, Dahl's board of directors made the call: cut and run. The corporation pulled out of Pandora nearly overnight, abandoning absolutely everything and everyone, including massive infrastructure, research data, and thousands of employees, both free and imprisoned. What was left behind became the foundation for the Anachaeic wasteland that would define Pandora in the years to come. Dahl's settlements fell into decay, their equipment was scavenged and repurposed by bandits, mercenaries, and later by rival corporations like Hyperion. The once proud facilities became dens for outlaws and their security systems, still partially functional. Things like the Dahl Memorial Dam turned deadly with age and neglect, and hosted things like bandit camps. In particular, the Dahl Headlands, once a central hub of operations for Dahl, became a lawless zone filled with rogue machines and scavenger clans. The fallout of Dahl's retreat would echo for decades, shaping the political and social landscape of Pandora forever. It's actually been theorised that the abandoned Dahl miners left to rot on the planet were the first wave of psychos that Pandora had ever seen, with a second wave coming after Hyperion occupied the planet and turned people into these crazed maniacs with slag experimentation. Yes, the psychos you see in Borderlands 1 are theorised to actually be completely different to the ones you see in 2, from the way they came to the planet and the way they went insane. There is another slightly similar theory, however, that the miners were not actually the psychos you see in Borderlands 1, but the rats that you see in Borderlands 2, which I believe makes more sense. They are seen to be wearing brown mining clothes, military uniforms, and even gas masks and mining hats, with some of the rats you see having completely white eyes, going blind from being underground for such a prolonged period of time. The first places you also see them for the first time are both places previously owned and occupied by Dahl: the Memorial Dam, aka the Bloodshot Stronghold, and the Fridge. Just a thought for you there. Dahl's reputation never recovered from the debacle on Pandora. The corporation itself survived, but with a severely diminished profile. It retained control of its off-world holdings and maintained a foothold along Elpis itself and in its weapons and utility manufacturing. Dahl firearms and munitions, once standard issue for their corporate soldiers, started to become very popular among vault hunters and mercenaries alike, leading the way for Dahl to switch from mining to pure military occupation. At least eventually. Dahl has been outfitting the Defenders of Freedom for over a century, and isn't about to stop anytime soon. We've built our company on the foundation that dead customers can't be repeat customers. Keeping you alive is in our best interest. We also know that those of you doing the government's secret dirty work have enough to contend with and don't need to fight your weapon too. That's why we here at Dahl have strived to manufacture the smoothest and most stable guns on the market, and when you get surrounded, and you will, you'll be glad to know your Dahl has been precision machined to remain as accurate during sustained fire as humanly possible. So make sure you bring a Dahl with you the next time you go on assignment. It might just bring you back. Much like their operations on Pandora itself, Dahl was drawn to its moon Elpis by the promise of rich mineral resources and the potential for Iridian technology, the same alien power that had started rumours of vaults and untold treasure. Dahl's approach to Elpis was typically corporate and militarised, similar to Pandora. They established mining operations, military outposts, and prison labour camps across the moon's surface. Towns and cities like Concordia were originally Dahl Company towns and cities, built to house workers, soldiers, and prisoners under strict surveillance and control. Concordia was later relinquished as a military outpost and given to the people as its capital city. Dahl relied heavily on prisoner labour, a cost-saving method like the one they similarly used on Pandora. These prisoners worked in dangerous conditions, excavating moon rock and searching for signs of Iridian activity. Dahl military officers oversaw the operations, enforcing order through discipline and force. Colonel Tungstina Zarpedon was one of those officers. She was in charge of the major military force on Elpis, tasked with maintaining order and protecting corporate assets. Under her command, Dahl kept a tight grip on Elpis, until it all began to fall apart. As with their failed venture on Pandora, Dahl's grip on Elpis didn't last. The company faced similar internal problems, unrest among workers, dangerous conditions, and no major Iridian discoveries to satisfy the shareholders. With costs rising and returns shrinking once again, Dahl did what it had done before, cut their losses and abandoned the moon. The withdrawal of the moon was similar to Pandora, fast and brutal. Corporate leadership left, but many of the lower-ranking staff, civilians, and entire military units were stranded. This betrayal painted the seeds for later resistance, especially among the abandoned soldiers and prisoners who had been forced to survive on their own. Colonel Zarpedon, left behind with her troops now, refused to let the moon fall into chaos. Furious at Dahl's abandonment, she took command of the remaining forces and transformed them into the Lost Legion, determined to help Elpis from future corporate exploitation, especially by Hyperion. Even after Dahl's main retreat, their influence lingered, much like on Pandora. Abandoned facilities, mining equipment, old military gear and weapons were scattered all across the moon. Their technology continued to function, sometimes erratically, and their security systems occasionally turned hostile. The cities and infrastructure they built became the backbone for what remained of Elpis society and the people left up there by Dahl. Soldiers who once wore the Dahl uniform proudly were abandoned, turned to mercenaries, scavengers, or rebels. Zarpedon, now being the last true leader of what remained of Dahl's expansive military force, unfortunately met her demise at the hands of Hyperion, and it was at this point that Dahl had completely collapsed as a major military and interplanetary operation. Fast forward to modern day, and the Dahl Corporation is a shadow of the colonial powerhouse it once was. There was influence across the galaxy has waned, the remnants of its past remain scattered all across Pandora and Elpis, echoing the corporation's brutal legacy of militarization, exploitation, and expansion. Dahl itself did not play a major active role in the Calypso's takeover, however, the remnants of their operations are everywhere. On Pandora, countless facilities, abandoned outposts, and ruined settlements bear the Dahl logo, their structures now overtaken by nature, scavengers, or hostile wildlife. These locations often contain old logs, weapons, and tech, telling fragmented stories of Dahl employees and prisoners left behind after the corporation's abrupt withdrawal from the planet. In many ways, Dahl's presence is felt not through action, but through absence. The corporation once colonized Pandora and Elpis with a heavy hand, but today, all that's left are decaying monuments to their failure, much like Atlas and Hyperion. Though Dahl no longer actively control territory or ventures into military expansion anymore, as far as we're aware anyway, their weapons remain widely used across the galaxy. Dahl guns are known for their military efficiency, solid accuracy, and modern tactical design, waning in on their initial military roots, long forgotten. Despite the fall of Dahl's operations on Pandora and Elpis, their weapon tech remains relevant, suggesting the company is still active, off-world if in a more limited or reconstructed capacity. There's no telling where Dahl are currently operating from and if they're even a military power of any kind anymore, but what they did have was immense. A quick glance at their military unit shows us their true might back in their day. Axton, a Vault Hunter who primarily operated out of Pandora, showed off a rather interesting piece of Dahl equipment known as a saber turret. It's hard to know if what he was part of is a specialised unit that was given these to deploy, similar to lance turrets used by Atlas, but a legion of saber turret welding soldiers would be a scary thing to come up against. Dahl's military was very simplistic in its use of technology and equipment, often being more similar to Vladof in the way they utilise weapons and less like Maliwan. Units are usually coloured in a very simple green, with basic armour pieces and the occasional jetpack. Officers are very similar but have two distinctions, one being a cap and more bulky armour pieces, but also a distinctive marking on the forehead, which is permanently affixed and is used to show rank. Axton can be seen with one, displaying the rank of Sergeant, and Zarpedon can also be seen with one, displaying the rank of Colonel. This shows an integrated culture around Dahl's military, and anyone previously involved will have that marking for life, showing how dedicated they seemingly are to their cause, most of the time at least. Dahl, also similarly to Vladof, had mechs in their military, this time being called power suits. They're a lot larger than Iron Bears, but did leave the user exposed. These also did seem to be used for multi-purpose ventures like repairs and maintenance, as opposed to purely militaristic tactics like the Iron Bear units. Dahl's fall from grace and eventual complete collapse is a lore piece so utterly interesting to me, it actually kind of sort of saddens me. The complete domination and expansion of Dahl to Pandora and Elpis brings up so much lore around the company to the point where I wish Borderlands would explore more things in the way Dahl used to be. To see an interplanetary megacorporation fail in such spectacular fashion and abandon its operations leaves so much behind for people to discover, which lends itself extremely well to spectators and many trying to fill in on how Dahl truly failed. I call it the largest of the big three for a reason. It was probably as large as Atlas and Hyperion put together when it first expanded into Pandora, and the fact it got here years and years before these companies even got a foot in shows how large Dahl truly was on this planet. They were everywhere and kind of still are, and had nobody to compete with, which makes it even more interesting how they managed to fail and leave thousands, if not tens of thousands of soldiers, occupiers, and prisoners to die. The fact that the first time we hear anything about Dahl is long after they have already left the planet is so intriguing to me. I made the same point in my video talking about how Borderlands 4 could have been a prequel to Borderlands 1, but I would love to have seen how Dahl truly occupied Pandora before they decided to cut their losses and leave for good. I do fear that with the current team of writers, however, they would just get the whole vibe and context completely wrong. I mean, it is hard to write a sequel to a game anyway, let alone when it's completely different people making it to the first ones, and going off stories about what Dahl were like on Pandora in the first place. Either way, Dahl, even with its monumental fall from grace, has certified itself as an iconic and staple part of the Borderlands universe, and much like Atlas and Hyperion, had the peak of absolute giants, but the fall of a lifetime. Stanton Dahl always said that there was three types of people in this universe. People who needed to be killed, the people doing the killing, and the people who pay them. He founded the Dahl Corporation for the second group. When you fight not for your country, not for honour, but to put food on your table. There's only one weapons manufacturer with your interests in mind. The Dahl Corporation. With so many megacorporations and militaries in the Borderlands universe, it was really fun to be able to go into great detail with them and talk about many unknown things, as well as the overall story. Lore in Borderlands has got to be one of the most interesting things to me, and how can it not be? You've got these companies that are using the equipment of, you're actually fighting in the story in some instances, and you're hearing them talk over radio about how great they are. It's not hard to want to find out more, and I am so grateful that in most instances there are plenty of examples of who they are, what they do, and who runs them. Obviously some companies are easier to talk about than others, as you probably heard today. Some are heavily explored in one area like Jakobs and its CEOs, and others in their military and how they operate like Hyperion. I think that's nice in a way. You don't need to know everything about each company because it leaves room for speculation. I would love companies like Anshin, for example, to have a little bit more to go off, but once again, that's what makes it so interesting to me in a way. Well, I'm extremely interested in the future of Borderlands' story and what it will hold, and I hope you guys are too. Hope you enjoyed watching and listening, and hopefully you learned about the companies. If you're new to the series and wanted to find out more about them, or even if you did know the stories of the companies and you just wanted to learn a bit more, or just wanted a recap, hopefully you learned a thing here or two that you didn't before. It took me a long time to get all this together, so once again, hopefully you appreciate all the little segments and little tidbits I've got. Don't think I know everything though, so if you have some lore pieces down below you'd like to put that I didn't cover in this video, or you think people would find more interesting to cover in greater detail than I have today, those comment sections are always going to be there for you to put things down. My name is ManelFX. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video, guys. Peace.